Welcome to the Retirement Spy. This week, we're excited to have a good friend and a coach of mine forever, Tommy Newberry. Tommy is America's success coach, and that's an understatement for what Tommy does. In all fairness, Tommy is the founder of the 1% Club, and I've been, with Tommy more than 30 years, Tommy. It's been a long time. Tommy's success, in all fairness, is literally the 1% Club that I started 30 years ago. And what I like about Tommy, just to give you an introduction of Tommy, he is a best-selling author, the founder of the 1% Club. He's written over 7 books, which is a tribute in and of itself if anybody's ever tried to write a book. And so what Tommy has done is also written a bestseller that I love called The 4-8 Principle, where he was a New York Times bestseller. And once again, the tribute to Tommy for what he's done. He's been a success to many in my circles and a success to me over the years and what I've done, as I say, over 30 years. Without further ado, let me introduce you to my good friend, Tommy Newberry, the 1% Club, America's success coach.
Great. Thanks for having me, Duncan. Always love talking about success and concepts related to success and what does it mean? What doesn't it mean? And what does life mean? And how do we get from where we are to where we want to be? So let's go deep with this.
Let's do. So in the 1% Club, you spent your entire career helping me and others achieve their dreams. Tell us about the 1% Club platform, its purpose, and how it started, and a little bit about your steps in doing that.
Well, it started, which is kind of hard to believe now that it's so much time has gone by, but the 1% Club was started 1991, October of 1991, and probably a decade before I should have started anything like that. So I was 3 or 4 years out of college, and I just had a passion for helping people get from where they are to where they'd really rather be, AKA developing their God given potential. And what I found after a couple of false starts in the fall of 91 was that people who produced for a living, I tried to call on some Atlanta businesses starting in Atlanta, and, I had no resume, I had no credentials that were relevant. There was no field called coaching in fall of 91. I called myself a coach to kind of camouflage that I was single and 25, and I was calling on people who were in their 30s and had kids. And so I just started calling on producers in the commercial real estate, commercial insurance, financial services a little bit, but different fields, but they all had one thing in common. They wanted to get to the next level financially without screwing up their faith, their family, and their health. And there was nobody at the time that was working with what I would call the already successful, the affluent, those who at least had hit tier number one of success. Then there was nobody there's a little bit of that, but not much. And then, but then if you add the next tier, which I saw as a niche, there was really nobody else. And that was working with these individuals beyond just the business side of life. And then the third layer, which kind of became my niche, which happened before I met you, was a long-term relationship. So instead of a Brian Tracy or Dennis Waitley or Tony Robbins kind of model where you go into a city, you impact 500 to 1,000 people, and then in the next 3 days, you're in 3 more cities, I kind of camped out in one spot and got to know people. And so before we got going, we were talking a little bit about how long it's been, but I've had clients who were single, and in the span that I'm still working with them, they are grandparents.
Wow.
And
That's
it's
huge.
kind of cool to see that happen and their lives unfold. And the other thing is that I have learned, even in the first 3 or 4 or 5 years, since everybody was older than me, most everybody that I worked with was already married and had kids, and I was single. And so I basically developed what I ended up teaching from my pool of clients who were further ahead of me in life. I just kind of grabbed it all and turned it into some curriculum and some content. And then as I began to go through life, I began to learn these lessons firsthand. And then I would share with people like you the best practices of other people like you, and then would put it into a structure and a format that people seem to enjoy coming back to, and being around other people who were like-minded. Particularly when you run an organization or you're the leader of a sales team, you didn't necessarily have a peer that you could open up with and share your life with. And so, over time, we focus more and more and more on entrepreneurs. And now it's about helping ambitious entrepreneurs, business owners engineer the life they want intentionally, relentlessly, meaning they never give up or hit a wall and go, well, that's it. And then most importantly, faithfully.
Sure.
And I mean that term in every sense of the word, not just faith as in one's religion, but I mean that, but also faith in, that things are going to work out. And the greatest way you can show faith is by persisting,
Mhm.
because persistence and faith are almost synonyms, because you would never have one without the other.
And your platform, I thought, always did such a good job. People went there focusing on business. What can I do to grow my revenue, grow my company? But I just remember in my mind, there are always several parts of the success of a one percenter, and it was beyond money, so far beyond money. It was about the kids, it was about your spouse, physical. There are just so many aspects that are important that I think a lot of people that are in maybe conventional business coaching platforms miss. And I think that was something that we did that was more unique than anything else.
Yeah, when I look at the victory wall, you can remember the victory wall.
Yeah.
To me, that was a client idea. I think that was somebody we both know. I think that was his idea. There were two things that were great ideas that really helped me that came from clients. And one was a victory wall. Every 90 days, people come in, they put some kind of symbol of their success up on a wall. And so when other people come in, they see it and it inspires them. And then also hanging up the letters that people wrote on the walls. So when people came in, so it kind of created a marketing system. But the reason the victory wall is so powerful is, right at first it started off being contracts and, new buildings going up and new offices opening up in Dallas or Salt Lake City or whatever it was. And then over time, it just morphed into personal fitness achievements, family etched memories, mountain climbs, and just all sorts of stuff, to where you looked at it and it was a giant collage, floor to ceiling, of somebody's life
Yeah.
that they had intentionally created. And in retrospect, it seems more powerful. So it's, what is it, kind of paraphrasing Proverbs, but what does it profit a man?
Yeah.
If he gains everything else, but loses his soul, he loses his family, he loses his faith and what he's about, he loses his spirit. And it's real easy to have that happen because we're all humans. Exactly 0% of the population is immune from falling.
Yeah.
If they hit the right circumstances at the right moment, we are all fallible. I didn't understand that when I was young, but I understand that in anybody, if you don't have a structure, if you don't have accountability, if you don't have some guys on the path with you to pick you up, it's real easy to fall.
Yeah, the victory wall was such an important part of the 1% Club. So motivational for people. I'm thinking of one of our friends who got an award from Bill Gates, and he's on front and center with Bill Gates. I think another was ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, if I remember correctly. So many people, whether it's on top of a mountain or everybody else, just great success stories. So here's the question. At the Retirement Spy, we use the word phase two, or phase two planning, meaning retirement, versus how do you plan your career like you've taught us in your primetime career in the 1% Club. We've been taught to study hard to prepare to go to college, and to go to college to get careers, and to have careers so that you can succeed in those careers, with the end goal tied to some degree of financial success that says you don't have to work anymore. Let's say the financial aspects are important. When money is no longer a goal for a one percenter, what does retirement look like for a one percenter?
Well, it's a great question. One thing I think we have to establish from the get go is that a lot of the things that we've learned and been programmed with are just made up. I mean, that sounds kind of,
Societal norms.
uh, yeah, but it's just, I mean, you can't touch these things. They're just thoughts, they're just concepts, they're just ideas. And somebody made them up and we were exposed to them at some point and we bought into them. But I'm not and so, but if it works for somebody, I mean, if they're happy and fulfilled, then more power to them. But I just see a lot of unhappy, unfulfilled people who are better off than literally zero point 0.9 billion other people on the planet. And they're miserable, they're out of shape, their relationships are a mess, and they don't really have any focus. And it doesn't need to be that way. as far as retirement, I've never been a fan of the term. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But men in particular, and now my coaching practice is kind of honed in. We still do the couples retreat, we do some one off things, but mainly now, after 25 or so years of having men and women, but still mainly men, we're now just specifically men because there's such a need for men to have camaraderie with one another and relationship with one another, and also to be sharpened by people with similar values who don't want to hang it up because the statistics on men in retirement is not good. It's almost like a signal, okay, Tommy, okay, Duncan, it's time to start slowing down. And we need to keep contributing because happiness in the retirement years is, in my mind, no different than happiness in the work years. And that is happiness equals growth.
Exactly.
Growth equals happiness. Now, how you grow, that can obviously change, but when you have memorized basically ease, comfort, and familiarity and safety, when you become addicted to those dynamics, it sucks you in. Literally death, it probably unconsciously becomes more attractive because it's so boring, so unstimulating. And it doesn't have to be that way. If you're retiring at 65 or, quote, retiring, we know a lot of people that retire younger than that. And all you have to do is grow. I think you should throw the word retirement out
Growth.
completely and just replace it with I'm going to grow. I'm going to grow in a different way. I'm going to grow through some causes that I care about. I'm going to grow through taking care of my physical body at a whole new level so that I can have another decade or decade and a half of real contribution and productivity. Or I'm going to grow in such a way to mentor the next generation. Or I'm going to grow spiritually. Even if we wanted to, we can't devote all of our hours. So if you sleep 8 hours a night, then you have 100 to accomplish everything else you want to accomplish and become who you want to become. So even if we wanted to, it's not feasible or practical probably for you or I to spend 112 hours with our faith. But for Pete's sake, if we're retired, whatever that means, and we're kind of doing a 15-minute Bible study every morning and going to church once a week, I mean, maybe think about raising the bar there spiritually. That's what I would say to somebody who I'm coaching. I'm not going to go say that to any old group or any old person who didn't want to hear that. But what a great opportunity to be financially in a position to where you can be an A plus in your health and fitness and physical body and have such a deep connection with God that it's profound. I mean, just
That
what if it was just those
it's
two things?
it's just, it's so amazing. I think you hit the nail on the head. You had mentioned that I think we get stuck in conventional wisdom that at 65 you should be on the beach with a bucket of beer reading a book, and that's the vision of retirement that people in
or
society have
or on a
created.
golf course or a
7
boat,
days a
or
week on a
you just
golf course.
whatever it is that you want. But it's a paradox in life that we actually thrive on challenge. I just got back a week ago today, I said, but climbing Mount Rainier, kind of a interesting way that came about. But 30 years ago this summer, I was asked by a group of clients and friends at the last minute, 10 days out, to join them on the climb of Mount Rainier. And I said, well, what's involved? And Dave said, you're ready.
Here.
No problem. Just come join us. And so I did. The guides pulled me off maybe, you know, 12,000 feet or something. It's 14,400. Well, anyway, 30 years later, a week ago today, I summited Mount Rainier with two of my sons. So it was two 19-year-olds, three 27-year-olds, and me and our guides. So 30 years later, so I put that goal on hold, but it always bugged me. It was like unfinished business. So I came back and did it. And let me tell you, I was miserable most of the time.
I'll bet you were.
But, and it was the hardest thing I ever did. So I was 58 and next youngest was 27. The guides, I was 20 years older than the guides. But coming off of that, I have such a surge of momentum and energy, like having done it. And I almost broke down crying on top just because I thought I was so close to have worked for this for 9 months and then missed the mark. But then it was even the last 9 months of like working toward it, even if I had missed it, I was so blessed by the additional workouts I got in it, the things I said no to as a result of having that goal. It had nothing to do with business,
Yeah.
but and everybody, what a great time to be alive. We've got 100,000 options of how we could spend our life. I happen to not be really any good at climbing mountains. I've done 3 or 4 of them, and they've all been a struggle. They've all been terribly painful. And when I'm done with them, it's something like, I wonder what the next one I can do
Hey,
is.
Tommy,
So a
let
lot,
me ask you a
yeah.
question. Why do you climb a mountain?
Well, what's the philosophical answer?
Because it's there.
It's there. The reason I climbed this one is I tried once before and I didn't make it. So I wanted to come back and do it. And what's the obvious glaring obstacle? Well, you're 30 years older.
Yeah.
What difference does it make? I mean, if you look at the leader of the free world right now, he's 20 years older than me. Is that right? Yeah, 20 years older than me, 21 years older than me. Um, in other words, we could sell. What if we're all selling ourselves really short? And what really makes us come alive is something that we care about and want to make a difference with. But if you love playing golf, play a lot more golf. If you love being out on the beach or the boat, be out on the beach and be in your boat a lot, but then make sure that you oscillate, like you go from stress, so doing something hard that the world needs, that's meaningful to you, doing something hard that the world needs that's meaningful to you, and then you go into recovery, which is your golf, your boating, your beach, your hiking, hanging out, whatever
There
it
has to be
is,
some
and you
growth.
go back and
There
forth.
has to be some growth or
It has to
contribution.
be growth. Yeah, because you can overdo it. Like in our business years, we can get burned out. We can be workaholics. But what is often not talked about, you and I talked about it in one of our curriculum books, with The Power of Full Engagement, and that you can actually over recover. It sounds kind of funny, but we probably are thinking of certain people in our head, but you can almost over recover, meaning be too chill,
Yeah.
too lax, too carefree. And you can get out of balance by having too much free time, just like you can get out of balance by having too much work
No
time.
question. Something to think about. And I'd love to hear what your clients at 1% are thinking as it relates to, and I know you have contemporaries because we're all in the same age level here from some of the people who started. Those clients of yours that are pondering retirement now, as I've interviewed so many of them, one of the big things that pops up is the term significance. You've run a multi-million-dollar enterprise. You've had thousands of people report to you. You love flying on your corporate jet. You've had some degree of significance that people look up to you. And I want to hear some other thoughts from you. But one of the things I've heard is that, Duncan, what I fear is the loss of significance. Right now, I'm significant. It's not about the paycheck, because we all know it's not about the paycheck. It's like, what am I going to do when people aren't standing attention when I walk into a room? And that's probably more ego than anything else. But the people you're talking to that are going through the retirement, what's the fear? What are the questions beyond financial, of course? What are they talking about? What are they thinking about?
Well, I think you hit on one of them there that I'll come back to. But is this all there is?
Hmm.
It's not necessarily a good question, but then there's the question of, what do you do when money's no longer needed? I think that's such an interesting question, but maybe for a surprising reason. I think, what is the assumption in that question? What do you mean the money's not needed? You don't need the money? Somebody needs the money. So what if you're the one that earns the money so that somebody else can be blessed by it? I think that's how it works anyway, but that's why I like that phrase, your success blesses others. But what if there's no need for money, but that's not the point of money? The point of money is to show the impact that you're having in the marketplace or in other people's lives. So you come up with another way to make money. If you have too much money, give it away. I mean, there's an interesting story. Rick Warren, who wrote The Purpose Driven Life. So he was a minister out in California, and he's a pretty well-known minister. And he wrote a book called Purpose Driven Church. And it did so well, it got parlayed, as books often do, into a sequel. And it was A Purpose Driven Life. And then it blew up, kind of like Seven Habits of Highly Effective People in the late 80s. What he did is he paid back his church, like his 25 years of
Oh,
salary,
I remember that.
because that's how much money he
Yeah.
made. And then he continued to just earn money he's still doing that with the proceeds of the book, but he's just donating it. So I'm not saying that's like a good idea, but it's an interesting idea. But what if now you've earned enough money to take care of your family and your offspring? Now you're going to use your incredible business skills to earn money for certain causes beyond a typical tithe or charitable donation to get your names on a building. Why not just do it world class? Like the world's on fire. How about using your skills and abilities to help solve a problem that the world needs to be solved? But since you hit on the ego, that is like a huge issue that is bubbling up. People aren't necessarily, I'm not saying they're talking about it, but it like the, people not standing at attention when such and such walks in the room or the guy's playing, or you want that level of self import. Everybody has an ego, number one. And egos can get out of control. We're all vulnerable, but the ego is really just a phony thing. It's just a made up story that we have made up in our own mind that we then try to live consistently with. And yes, there are people in our life, like if you're a big wig or somebody notable who will, that phrase, feed your
Yeah.
ego. They will feed your ego. But that's like kind of like feeding the beast, because the ego starts to control
Yes.
you. And I like the kind of the acronym for EGO,
Got
edging
out.
God
Yeah.
out.
Edging got out. Yeah.
And so possibly, so let's say you just crushed it financially, you got a good life, you got a good wife, you're healthy, maybe it's time to spend a phase of the retirement, if you want to use that term, to work on moderating your ego so that for the rest of your life, to be the best of your life, you're not operating at the beck and call of this manufactured image and story that you've been telling yourself about yourself, possibly for decades,
It's interesting.
because you can break
It's
that.
interesting that you mentioned this because, Tommy, I got to share this with you. One of my clients from years ago did very well. He took a company public and he was proud of himself. He was like, I've created 16 millionaires when I took my company public. And he's very proud of this. And ego comes into play here because I know him way too well. And he started another company up to go do it again. He says, I want to create more millionaires. I'm like, I don't think so. I think this is more about your ego than it is anything else. I think my point is your success does bless others, but I think with this one individual in hand, this was a byproduct of his public speech of what he's doing for others when what he really wanted was just a bigger platform for himself. But I love where you're going with this is
Yeah,
the ego. If you can get the ego in check, then you can figure ways to better the world that doesn't necessarily have to be running a company, doing what you've been doing, unless you truly love it.
it can just be, yeah, it can just be what, I mean, how to me, let's say you're 55, 65, 70, it doesn't matter what you are. And as long as you keep yourself in good mental and physical health, then you have, which is, that's a big if. But if you do, then you can accomplish and enjoy life like our parents and grandparents did not do, if you are healthy and fit and emotionally healthy and fit. But you can start telling yourself a new story about
Mhm.
yourself. And the best way to do it is to start doing things that the old you would not have done. I mean, that's the fastest way to reinvent yourself, is to start doing things that the previous you of a decade ago, 5 years ago, would not have done. And by doing those things, that becomes the new you. The egos, we don't take it with us. We don't take our body with us, as far as I know. Like, I mean, in other words, when we die, and we're not going to get out of here alive, when we die, the ego and the body are not going with us. The only thing that's permanent hasn't changed since we were
I love it.
conceived.
I love
I mean, we're a beautiful, wonderful child of God. God sees us the same. We are no better and we're no worse than we were. So we can have the jet, we can have the best-selling book, we can have the perfect family picture, whatever it is, but we're no better and we're no lesser than anybody else. So retirement would be a great opportunity to work on your head game so that you can get really close to God and not have attachments. People say they have a lot of problems and I've still got to do, well, they don't have that many problems. They have attachments to so much stuff that I think is a
I
barrier, between them
I
and
love
God.
George has a song and in there it says, I've never seen a hearse with a luggage rack. We can't take it with us. But I love what so question, I love where you're going with this. When I've worked with you for so many years, there are usually about 5 areas we're always talking about that we're working on our faith, our family, our finances, fitness, and their spouse and their or fun. And we had for many years, these are now being shaken up. So if there's no need for money, so that finances has a different definition. A lot of us, their kids are already launched. In our family, we call it the 3 E's. We've got educated, employed, and evicted. I love you, Nolan. That's my son. He understands what that means. But so, and sadly, some of us, even in 1%, as we've gone on in life, don't have spouses anymore. So the goals and the focuses are different. If as you hit phase two, if those are the 5 main categories we had in phase one, what are the categories now in phase two?
I think for many people they would be very much the same but different. Different meaning what you're trying to accomplish or satisfy in each is different. But as I mentioned before, you may be no need for money, but check the assumption there.
Yes.
So there is need for money because you have apparently, you and those like you who have mastered money can earn money that benefit other people. So there is still a need for money and you do it quite well. So why not check that assumption and maybe earn more money? As far as like spouse, if one has lost their spouse or they're divorced, then, then that's, what do you want to do? So there's opportunities. This sounds kind of crass, but there's opportunity there, whether it's a lost spouse or a divorced spouse, there's opportunities for new relationships. I mean, if that situation is final, then that's final. That's a fact. So then what do we do to make the most of that scenario? Or how do we learn how to love the people that are in our life better than we currently love them? And then, but the one thing that I'll keep coming back to, because I have been on a kind of been on a mission in the last, maybe not a whole decade, but close to it, certainly since COVID or maybe a little pre-COVID, is the fitness thing. It's just, it's so easy to get sloppy with your health and fitness. And I like the term sloppy because I'm not saying somebody's fat or they're really out of shape, it's just sloppy. And I believe that when I see somebody sloppy, like I can visually go, they're sloppy, or you can, and I've been sloppy before, that's not the only thing where they're
Yes.
sloppy.
Yes.
It's like, so one percenter from the 90s ended up opening a whole like 15 Wendy's all across the Southeast, and then went into maybe Aaron Rents or something like that. But he said he learned a secret that we keep our windows really clean. This is a dated example, but we keep our windows really clean because unconsciously, Dave Thomas believed, I think that was his name, that if people see dirty windows, they think the kitchen's
Yes. And they
dirty.
won't eat there.
And also the second one is the bathrooms. If the bathrooms are
Yeah.
clean, but there was something running through Wendy's culture 30 years ago that if the bathrooms are dirty, just imagine what the kitchen looks like.
Oh my.
And so when somebody, this is not like a golden rule. There are exceptions, but by and large, it takes a lot of discipline when you get in your 40s, 50s, 60s and up to take care of your physical
Well, it's
body.
the image too.
So if you are doing that, then you have a level of discipline that is a cut above others. And first of all, you bring your body to everything you do. So if you think you can get by with what I remember sharing with people in the 90s was, hey, 20 minutes 3 times a week on the treadmill, that's a joke. But so how about when you have 112 hours a week, why not give 2 hours a day to your health and fitness?
What?
Stretching,
And
mobility, weightlifting,
image
aerobic.
is a part of this. I don't want to be the old guy in Miami with the tall black socks and patent leather shoes walking down the beach with shorts on. We've got an upcoming podcast with
Yeah.
a
Well,
fashion coach who'll say, hey, look, just because you're old and you're in retirement, you don't have to dress like you're old in retirement. You got to have something other than a t-shirt and shorts in your locker room, so to speak.
yeah, but I mean, that's a funny visual. I'm trying to unsee you in the long black socks in
I didn't
Miami,
say
but
me. Wait a minute. I was just making a metaphor of what you see on
um,
cartoons.
just think about that. If you we take it for granted. If we wake up and there's no shadows on the X-ray or the imagery, there's no blood tests that are all out of whack, we can accomplish anything. But if you, and the way that the health generally goes and the relationship generally goes is not through some overt action, it's through neglect. Like, we've been talked about this at the couples retreat. It was the drift, just a little bit off track today, don't feel it. A little bit off track tomorrow, don't feel it. But then all of a sudden, it's like the sun also rising gradually, then suddenly. In other words, that's how most of the things that cause us to have angst and regret, to well up in tears and to seek solace or numbing, they happened gradually and then suddenly, and then we look for some way to numb ourselves. And so when you start to kill that ego that has grown in a lot of successful people and unsuccessful people, just in a different way, then you're free to be your best self. So that's what retirement should be, is free to break free from the bonds of the past, any stereotypes about yourself, any stories that you've told about yourself. I think it should be, and I'm just kind of pulling this all together in my head as we're talking, I think retirement should be for reinvention. That's what I think it should be
As
for.
a friend of mine says, retire and rewire. And I like that a lot. Hey, question.
I love that.
Your best-selling book by New York Times, your New York Times bestseller, Christian values are very much an integral part of your mission. Tell us a little bit about the 4-8 principle. And let's not spend too much time, but I really want to highlight the book, the 4-8 principle, and how it could apply or should apply to our audiences going into phase 2 or retirement, as we'd said.
Yes, well, that's a thank you for asking about it. The 4-8 principle is a book, but it's more importantly, it's a biblical principle based on Philippians 4:8, which at the core says this, that where our attention goes, our energy flows. What we focus on, we experience more of. So if we're thinking of this in the marital realm, if we focus on the flaws in our spouse, we'll notice those flaws. They will seem to be more predominant, or we'll with our kids or in the world. So whatever we focus on, we notice more of, which then creates this thought loop. So if we want to experience joy during those retirement years, we want to use that, maybe that little bit of extra time that we have, to learn how to discipline our minds so that our reaction to events in life are trained. They're not like a wild animal in the woods, although we sometimes act like it, but that we train ourselves from retirement on to really have a more responsible reaction to our spouses, our children, to world events, to our friends, to the things that are happening around us, which we have no control over. Because who we really are is kind of the sum of our reactions. And you can learn to get better at those, or you can abdicate that and just be kind of like a wild animal in the woods. So the 4-8 principle, you get what you focus on. These are the specific words of the Apostle Paul. He said, he was in prison, he was in sewage, he was chained under guard. And he said, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is lovely, pure, true, gracious, just, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think on these things. Other translations, meditate on these things, or my favorite, your mind on these things. And it's so easy just in the marriage realm, but you could do this as a parent. We're both parents, we're both spouses, business world, life. It's so easy to ignore the 10 things that we love about this person,
And focus on the one.
to
Yeah.
completely ignore it. Focus on the 1 or 2 things that are deal breakers and just
Yeah.
fall to pieces. And then I believe that, I can't prove this, but I believe it. That other person
Yeah.
picks up on that. You don't
Yeah.
have to say a word,
All they hear is the one
but
criticism. The other 9 things that you said earlier, how wonderful they are. Like, no, I just heard that one. Thank you.
yeah, but even if you were speechless, wordless, you didn't say a thing, it seems, and I think maybe women are better at this than men, but they can feel your emotions without you having to say a word. And then they end up kind of producing a self
All the
fulfilling
time.
prophecy. So it's like, if somebody keeps saying, hey, you're late all the time, you're late all the time, you're late all the time, that kind of thing, whatever it is, or you always do this, you always do this, then that's pretty much what
I
they're
hate
going to notice,
superlatives. I hate
you know?
superlatives. Hey,
Yeah.
question. And this is one I might throw you. I don't know if I put this in your advanced questions or not, but I want to hear it from you anyhow. If America's success coach, Tommy Newberry, ever considered retirement, what would it look like? Okay.
I don't think I think if I had wanted to retire, I would have retired and done something else. I just want to do, maybe mix in. I think what it would be continuing to do what I've always done, but mixing in more time for health, more time for adventures, more time for relationships. I think I would just readjust the ratio I think for me, and not everybody's like this, I feel very blessed to be doing what I'm doing, but I would just like to get, if I was a million times better, if I was 1,000 times wealthier, I would not want to retire. I would just want to reconfigure how much of my time that I put in
Yep.
certain places. And I'd rather use some of my assets that could help me have a more comfortable retirement and use those to reach more people because I mean, we're all, this is so cynical and so positive at the same time. I think I heard this from a guy named Alex Hormozy, who's a great marketing genius for small business. But he said, 50 years from now, and I'll just say this with you, Duncan, 50 years from now, there's only going to be a few people that remember either one of us.
Less than that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to be generous. And in 100 years from now, it's going to be virtually no one. And yet it's real easy, particularly with affluenza, to get so worked up about what's important, what image we're carrying. We use up so much energy that could be used for good things in the marketplace and in the world, trying to project this image that any kind of prudent person knows is kind of phony anyway. And so we use up so much energy for that when we could be using the energy just to be authentic and to try to give as much as we can in the limited time we have, because 50 to 100 years from now, it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to remember either one of us. I mean, you'd have to be really to be remembered 100 years from now, you'd have to be at a whole new level of significance, which you mentioned that word significance. I've never liked that comparison. In my book, Success is Not an Accident, I noted that there was a whole field, a whole movement started. It was called Halftime by Bob
Remember the
Buford.
book.
And I know him. And I mean, yeah, and it's a great book. But it was about it basically, and I mean, I'm kind of making fun of it, so I apologize, but it was basically for a bunch of young, wealthy people, in their 40s who had so much money they didn't know what to do with it. Now they would go out and be significant. And I always thought to myself, well, that's real convenient. I don't know how that's very motivating, except to people who've already made it. In other words, and so I said in Success is Not an Accident, why not start with significance
Yes.
from the get go? So my definition of success, and I think your definition of success, requires significance. That's why I didn't like the shift from success to significance, as though success wasn't significant. Well, that's a definitional problem. That's not a conceptual problem with the word success. If you're just out there looting successfully, you're not a success. If you're out there manipulating people and not giving people what they paid for, that's not successful no matter how much
Good
money you have.
context. Good context.
So,
Hey,
yeah,
listen, I want to wrap up. Thank you so much for being here today. People I know are wanting to reach out to you after this podcast. What's the best way for them to get in touch with America's Success Coach?
best way is through tommynewberry.com, just like it sounds, or you can reach out to me on Instagram at Coach Tommy Newberry, um, or just Google me and you'll find me anywhere. But Tommy Newberry, Tommy at tommynewberry.com is also the email, but I'm pretty
I'm
Googleable.
sure, yeah, and Amazon. Of course, if you go to Amazon, you'll pull up all of Tommy's books too, all 7 of them.
That's right. Yeah. If you want the 4-8 principle book that you referenced, then that's available at Amazon. And one of the sequels to that, 40 Days to a Joy-Filled Life, is really picking up steam. And it's a small kind of devotional version of it. Surprising, but I don't know where that comes from because we're not actively pushing it, but it's got a lot of horsepower behind
Clearly, it
it at
comes
the
from
moment.
popular podcasts like this one. Tommy Newberry, thank you so much, my friend. You've been a blessing to talk to today. I look forward to following up on the ego subject with you a little bit later.
Cool. Love to do it. And thank you for having me.